Hello and welcome to Building Brand You, the show where we help you to accelerate your success, getting you more clients, more revenue, more business and more opportunities by unlocking your greatest asset, you. My name is Kym Hamer and I'm an international business coach and serial entrepreneur. This podcast is designed for you, to help you unlock what you already have and to give you a whole host of tools and techniques that can help you to accelerate your success by building your own brand you. Hello everyone and welcome to this special feature-length episode of Building Brand You. I am absolutely delighted to be joined by my special guest, Dr. Alan Barnard. Alan is an entrepreneur, philanthropist, strategy advisor, and research scientist. He is also an app developer, author, teacher, podcaster, and lifelong learner. Alan is considered one of the world's leading decision scientists and theory of constraints experts. His research focuses on understanding why good people make and often repeat bad decisions and how to avoid that. Alan is the CEO of Goldratt Research Labs, created to help individuals and organizations make better, faster decisions when it really matters. From their research, Alan and his team have developed the range of award-winning Harmony Decision Maker, Harmony Change Maker, and Harmony Change Simulator apps. Their clients include Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, and people from over 70 countries using their apps to make difficult life and business decisions. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Dr. Alan Barnard. Well, hello, Alan. How are you today?
I'm doing fantastically well. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm so excited to have you on the Building Brand You show today. Listeners, Alan and I bumped into each other at an event a couple of weeks ago, and he was telling me all the stuff he's been doing, which we're going to cover a little bit in our conversation on the show. And I just thought he would be the perfect guest to bring to you early in 2022. So again, thanks for joining us and thanks for taking the time, Alan. Now, I like to start by handing the mic over to you. And this is really an opportunity for you to tell your story. So without further ado, the mic comes over to you and tell us, who is Dr. Alan Barnard?
Well, I think in short, we can define ourselves in a number of ways. One way is to look at what drives us, what's our life goal. And for me, it's about helping people make better, faster decisions in their life and in their business when it really, really matters. That's sort of the essence of me. That's what I wake up in the morning, what I'm curious about, what I'm passionate about, and what drives me. How I got there was interesting story. I grew up in South Africa. We were, kind of low to middle class household. I wasn't particularly doing well at school or anything else. And then when I was in primary school, they asked us to write these tests. We had no idea what they were. And a couple of weeks later, a few of us were called up onto the stage, myself and my best friend included. And we were told that we were part of a group of kids called gifted kids. And I don't know who was more shocked, us or our parents, our teachers, because according to most definitions, we were nothing close to being gifted, but we had the opportunity as part of this to go after our normal school hours to go and attend the school for gifted kids. And we were able to do computer science and we just loved it. And almost immediately our marks started going up, and everybody had their own theory. Oh, they're being stimulated, etc. Well, about 3 months into this, my best friend got called into the principal's office and, an hour later he came out crying and I said, what happened? And he said, they told him that there was a mistake in these tests and that he's not really gifted. And I just still recall that. You can imagine, it's like, why would you tell a kid that, And he was devastated. I thought, okay, it's just a matter of time before they call me out as well. And almost immediately, his marks started dropping. and this really stuck with me, is how can it be that when you and others believe that you are gifted, that you then perform as if you're gifted? And then I read this quote from Henry Ford. My granddad always encouraged me to read the famous quote where he said, whether you believe you can or can't, you're right. And that sort of set me up. A few years later, I wrote an entry exam to get into high school, and I basically almost failed it. I barely passed it. And by that time, I'd been doing really well. I was really happy, and this was devastating. And I thought, remembering back that old scenario, I thought, okay, this is it. You're not really gifted. You've been able to wing it a little bit, and almost immediately my marks started dropping. And I was put into the D class for dummies, and just you realize that that's where you're going to be stuck. And I remember that quote and said, well, what if I change my belief? What if I just, rather than believe I'm not really gifted, I just had a bad day writing exams and I'm just going to study really hard? And, I started doing really well and ended up performing really, really well. But that lesson stuck with me, is that what we believe can change our decision making. And that sort of set me off on this path of studying, why it is that some people have the ability to make really good decisions in life. And as a result, they become extremely successful in whatever field they choose to go into, and others don't. And of course, the simple answer is that it's all about our assumptions. And there was an interesting kind of lesson I learned from science. In science, we know that you can't prove anything right, but you can prove it wrong. There's this principle called one case is a proof, right? You just need one case. You just need one black swan. It doesn't matter whether you've observed 1 million swans and they were all white. You just need one black swan, and you realize, that not all swans are white. The same thing is true for us. We can grow up in a environment where we have uneducated parents, we have no money, and as a result, I can believe, well, that's going to be my life. And I just need one case of somebody that grew up in similar conditions that made it to be successful, that I realized that hypothesis that I had, that if you don't have educated parents or a lot of money, you can't be, that is simply untrue. And that to me was interesting, because I realized, well, if you can't prove something right, what do you believe in? How do you know what assumptions or beliefs you should have? And my discovery very early on, this was in my early teens, was that it's more useful to think of assumptions and beliefs as helpful versus harmful than right versus wrong. So if I believe I can do something, it can be extremely helpful if it allows me to try, right? But the same assumption, I believe I can also be very harmful if I try something that's massively dangerous and I don't put in the 10,000 hours to become an expert at walking on a tightrope. I can fall down and kill myself. So that set me on this path of saying, can I develop a process that can be used by companies or individuals that very quickly helps them to discover and challenge limiting or harmful assumptions or beliefs? And that's kind of like most entrepreneurs, I turned this into a business, and that's what I do now. I have a research lab, and we study why good people make and often repeat bad decisions. And the first answer is it's really easy to make a bad decision. There's always many, many, many ways of getting something wrong, and very few ways of getting something right. When we teach the kids decision making, that's the first thing I teach them. And I say, give yourself some credit, and anybody that has made a bad decision that's affected you, give them some credit. If you think about it, you have a recipe with 4 steps, 4 ingredients, 1 temperature setting, right? How many ways are there to get it wrong? Right? So that's the first thing, is give yourself some credit. It's really easy to make a bad decision, and actually really hard to learn from our decision mistakes. I mean, we have a built-in mechanism to learn from experience, like you touch a hot stove plate, and you get immediate feedback and you learn. Of course, unless you're my boys, they have to touch it 2 times just to make absolutely sure. But we learn from direct feedback. The problem in real life is that there's always lags in space and time between our actions and the consequences of our actions. So it's actually really hard to learn from experience. Imagine that stoveplate burnt you just a day later or a week later. How would you put those two events together? And that's kind of what I'm passionate about. So in our research lab, we study why good people make bad decisions and often repeat it, both in their private lives, but also in business. And we've developed a whole range of apps that are specifically targeted at helping us to avoid those really consequential decision mistakes.
There's so much I want to ask you just in that first little bit, Alan.
Sure.
I mean, that whole story you told about your friend being told that they weren't gifted, that whole power of our mind and what we believe about ourselves. But I was thinking about my experience of coming from corporate to entrepreneur. I spent 28 years in corporate life, and I've only been in the entrepreneur space for 3 years. And one of the things that just really resonated was that whole mindset. I needed to be around people who were doing and successful at what I wanted to do, so that I could say, okay, this is valid, this does work. I'm not quite there yet, but there's evidence, for want of a better word, that this is possible. Therefore, I believe it, and I can keep going. And that power of choosing how to surround yourself with the right beliefs and messages and the assumptions, the stories we make up in life about how life works is absolutely fascinating. Do you see that a lot when we make decisions as kids, or is it when we make decisions as adults as well that kind of connection happens?
Yeah, I mean, I think the apart from a decision to harm yourself or somebody else, the second worst decision is to convince yourself that it's impossible to do something. So whether you're a small business owner or a large business owner or an individual, as soon as you say it's impossible, basically it just gives an instruction to your mind to stop trying. Right? So essentially what I've done in my research lab is to see, are there simple questions that you can ask that can disrupt the mind from that vicious cycle? And one of my biggest aha moments was I was working with a mining group and was asked to teach them about theory of constraints and debottlenecking, one of the areas that I'm an expert in. And I walked into the room and I could just see from the body language that these guys were in no mood to get any lecture from anybody. And I said to them, what's the issue? And very quickly we figured out they had a target of 12 million tons for the year. They were in month 4, they'd only done 3 million tons. They were 1 million behind, and there was no clear way for them to catch up. And I did 2 things. I said to them, the first thing I want to know is what is currently occupying your budget and attention. Write down all the things that you are currently working on. And when they got to sort of 100, flip chart pages, I stopped them. And I then said to them, okay, we just agreed on the problem, right? The problem is that you're behind on meeting your target, which is the goal of the business. Tell me how many of these 100 initiatives that you're working on is actually going to help you make progress towards that goal. And as you can imagine, there were like 3 or 4. So that was the first big insight, is we feel that something is impossible because we completely overload it. We literally don't have the attention to give to the things that really matter. So the first step in every project that we do now, whether we work with Fortune 500 companies like Microsoft or Amazon or with individuals, is to say, make a list of all the things that you can stop doing because they're not helping you achieve the goal. But of course, that just releases capacity, right? It opens up the possibility. So the second thing I did was I called up the first team and we did some rough cut calculations of how much they need to speed up by in order to achieve the goal. And I said, so how are you going to do that? Just remembering at that stage, I have no domain experience about mining, right? I have no clue. So there's nothing I can offer them, some magical thing to help them produce more. And the guy just looked at me, the manager of this group that exposes to all, and he just looked at me and he said, it's bloody impossible. We can't do that. If we knew how to do that, we would be doing it. It's impossible. Now, how do you respond to that? Because you can imagine, because he believes it's impossible, he's not even thinking about it. And just at that moment, I asked him the question, it's impossible unless. And it turns out to be one of those disruptive questions. A great disruptive question is something that allows you to take what's sitting in the subconscious mind and elevate it into your conscious mind. So as soon as you try to answer that unless, and you can pick anything that you think is impossible, and you can try it for yourself, and the listeners can try it, right? What you'll find is you can't help yourself. You immediately start thinking about all the conditions that make it impossible, right? And your answer to the question is impossible unless is giving you the conditions that will make the impossible possible.
And it surfaces those, doesn't it? It
exactly.
surfaces those conditions.
Once you write them down, you realize, well, they're not that impossible, right? And that's what happened to this guy. He immediately is like, it's impossible unless, and, he gave me this unless condition. And he said, if we can go in there, we can open up this, but it will be too expensive. They'll never approve it. We're already behind budget. It's like, okay, do the calculations. Wow, you're going to get $50 million of benefit. It's only going to cost you $5 million. Do you think that they will approve that? Of course they will, right? And it was approved on the spot. And we replicated that for every level in the organization, starting off with ambitious target that's so ambitious that people feel it's impossible. And then you just ask, it's impossible unless. And that, to me, of all the things that I've developed so far, that's by far the simplest way to discover and overcome a limiting belief that really can be devastating and can lock you into a mode of lifestyle that, you can't imagine getting out of.
So where have you used it's impossible unless for yourself? Have you had an aha moment by using that statement for yourself, something you thought was impossible that has since not been?
Yes, I think, growing up where I grew up in South Africa and then having this dream to make an impact on the world, at that moment, it feels impossible, right? And then you say it's impossible unless. What is it that you can practically do to start making an impact on the world? And, in the old days, there were very limited opportunities for a person to reach the world. It was basically writing books, right? And if you were extremely gifted writer, that was a fantastic way of writing books. What my mentor that I met very early on in my life, Dr. Goldratt, who was the creator of Theory of Constraints and shared my passion to find simple ways to help people make better, faster decisions. He wrote a book when he was very young called The Goal, and it sold over 10 million copies. It's one of the top 150 books of all time. But you really need to be a fantastically gifted writer to write books like that, right? There's not many of them around. So what other ways? And that's kind of how I got into, I combined my early passion with, decision-making and computer science, and realized that the way to reach a lot of people is not just about writing books or doing presentations and speaking, but to develop an app. And that's kind of how my research lab has refocused over time to focus more and more on apps, because that to me is the way to make a massive impact on the world with a very low budget. Of course, I've also tried, the technique out of myself. It's impossible to be, in a fantastic relationship, because relationships are fragile. We harmed much more by things that go wrong than what we benefit from things that go right. In fact, we take the things that go right almost as a given. We're entitled to do that. So relationships are by definition fragile. That's why we have such a high divorce rate, and even the people that stay married are generally quite unhappy. So you can sit back and say it's impossible to be in a relationship that is incredible, that meets all your requirements and exceeds this, unless. And you just start writing down those unless conditions.
Wow.
And you met recently. You met my wife. We recently married, and it's incredible how, if you purposefully design those things, right? One of the big discoveries we made in our research is studying why you fall in love with somebody. And that's not just romantically, but also as friends or business partners, right? Because there are so many different things that you could consider. So what in the essence of it is really that. And it turns out it's people that make us feel special and safe. It really boils down to that. So once you realize that and you say, okay, it's impossible to be an incredibly satisfying and inspiring relationship unless we can be very clear with each other about what makes us feel special and safe, but also, as importantly, what makes us feel unspecial and unsafe. And to share those lists with each other,
Yeah,
Exactly.
it's actually something I hadn't thought about it as the special and safe, context. I've been in a number of different business partnerships as I've grown as an entrepreneur. And it's also something I talk about when I coach, as I say, you need to, before you start talking about your business, you need to talk about you and what you value and where you want to go and what's really important to you. And you need to ask questions of that other person. Because if those things are at odds, if those values and those I guess conditions are at odds, as much as you might be drawn to each other, it might not go very well because you're not really aligned with the other. But I love that special and safe.
We don't take enough time to that. There's you've heard of the golden rule of treat others the way that you want to be treated. Yeah. But there's a higher rule than that. It's called the platinum, which is treat others the way that they want to be treated. But that requires effort. It means that I need to understand how you want to be treated, and probably more importantly, how you don't want to be treated. Those are the things that make you feel unspecial and unsafe. So, it's now since I've made that discovery, whenever I'm getting in a position of advising, couples or businesses, it's like just write down that list. What makes you feel special and safe? What makes you feel unspecial and safe? And share your list with your partner.
Fantastic. I'm going to take that away and use that from that. I think that's just such a simple way of thinking about it. So let's go back to the app. This is where we sort of got quite animated in our conversation, wasn't it, when we bumped into each other? One of the things that I hear a lot as a business coach, and also, the question I've had for myself is, should I build an app? What's the purpose of an app? Everybody thinks they need an app, and it all looks very simple on the surface and easy to do. And some of the things that you were sharing with me, I kind of went, okay, this is the behind the scenes, behind the curtains. This is what really goes on. So you talked about the power of reach of the app. What's sort of like the light and the dark of the app world?
The light part is that the barriers to entry for building an app has dramatically reduced. Right, something that used to cost $500,000 can now be done for $5,000. Right, so people that say, I want to build an app, it's possible. You could build an app. You could download some software that sort of allows you to use templates and plug and play and create something very, very quickly, and that you can launch it. So that's the one trend, is that the barriers to entry to build apps have dramatically reduced. So it makes it possible for more people to build apps. But there's a counter trend, which is the failure rate has also dramatically increased. It's somewhere between 1 in 1,000 and 1 in 10,000 apps are actually profitable. And that's a devastating number to start off with. But when you're in the app development world, you understand why it is like that, right? So if I take one of our apps, the Harmony Decision Maker app, it's a cloud-based app, that you can download onto your device. So whether you're using a Windows machine or Mac or iPhone or Android phone or Amazon Kindle or Fire device, right? You can download the app from the App Store. It saves all the content of your analysis of your decision on your device, but also in the cloud. And you have an expectation that if you log on to another device, it will automatically be all synced up, and that you'll get the same content that you've just accessed on another device. So now you think about that as I have multiple platforms that I have to develop this app for, and then multiple versions of operating systems within each of the apps. So in the in the iPhone, we have to be backward compatible to iOS 9 all the way to the latest iOS 15. So just from that perspective, it becomes so overwhelming, and small errors in code can make the thing crash. So it becomes really, really difficult if you want to do it properly to succeed. So I think originally when the cost of developing it was so high, the only people that developed apps were people that could see a situation where maybe the cost was $500,000, but the upside was at least 10x or 100x of that. So because there is not that rigor anymore, obviously the failure rate will increase. But the prize is still there, right? That if you get it right, you could reach millions and millions and millions of people. The light and the dark to it is that, yes, the barriers to entry is much, much lower. But before you get into it, what I did, I had this curiosity about decision making. I started studying and researching everything I can about it, studying the giants, trying to stand on their shoulders, check whatever they came up with, the methods, all the way to Benjamin Franklin's pro-con list, what worked, what didn't work. Can I come up with a method that retained all the benefits of previous method but overcame their limitations? Then I turned that into a process. I started teaching the process, checked if it worked. Then I started teaching others to see if they can teach it in a way that it works. And only once we validated through that, which is essentially what I ended up doing my PhD on, I was then comfortable. Okay, now I have a repeatable process that really works. People doing it in workbooks sucks because if you make a mistake, you have to go all the way back. It's hard for you to share it with your coach or your mentor. Then suddenly an apps makes a lot of sense. And it was only then that we started developing the app. So that sort of sequence is important. Is don't try to develop an app when you have a process that hasn't been tested thoroughly, that you haven't tested that it's actually replicable and can be taught and learned by others easily.
Yeah, I think that's some great advice. So instead of building something for the app, actually build the process, the map first, and test that process first with people probably other than yourself, because we can get very wrapped up in our own world and we see what we want to see. I've just built my first online course, and I've given it to my 3 virtual assistants who've never seen it before in their life. They've never done this particular piece of work that I do in coaching. And I've said, I want you to just go through the program, just go through it, and I want you to have a pen and paper beside you, and I want you to tell me what doesn't work, what does work, what's confusing, what makes sense, just give me everything. So before we go out and promote it, it's only a sample of 3, but at least it takes it out of my world where I have lots of assumptions and lots of stuff in the background where I know how it's supposed to work.
And it's not just true for apps, right? It's also true for online courses that you just mentioned. You get the same massive failure rate. I have a couple of programs on Udemy, and I was recently in contact with one of the leadership at Udemy, and I asked them, what's the average income per course for a lecturer that has taken a course and turned it into an online course and made it available on? It's probably one of the largest online platforms in the world. He said it's around $30 to $40 a year.
Wow.
And you know how much effort goes into that, right? Most coaches and consultants can get easily $30, $40, for not just an hour session, but maybe a half an hour session. There's so many apps, so many courses out there. So to really be able to grab somebody's attention and keep it, it takes a lot of work and effort and thinking. And that's kind of obviously what you talk about in terms of branding is one of the elements that can make all the difference. And it was something I originally struggled with, because as an engineer and scientist, we know nothing about branding, especially personal branding, right? Getting out there and promoting yourself. Oh gosh, it sucked initially. It really sucked. I still, I'm not very natural at doing it, but you realize you have to, because even in Fortune 500 companies, you meet a person, you walk out of the room, the first thing that they do is they Google your name,
Yeah, but the world of Google and the whole online world makes it very easy to see what aligns, I think. And that's really how we build trust, isn't it? It's about seeing what aligns with what we've seen and contributes to our beliefs about people and assumptions and all of that. What really contributes to the success or otherwise of an app, given you've had a few goes at it?
I think it's like any solution, right? It has to solve a really important problem. But even if it does, unless you reach those people that have that consequential problem, it's not going to be successful. You're going to be wasting a lot of marketing spend on targeting people that don't have that. So that to me has been our biggest lesson, especially when you're taking an app like our Harmony Decision Maker app. Everybody makes decisions. We make around 35,000 decisions every single day. That can be absolutely overwhelming. The good news is most of those decisions don't matter, but there's a few that matters a lot, right? So those are our dream customers. Somebody that's facing a massively consequential life decision. So consequential meaning if you get it right or wrong, it will have a big impact, right?
Yep.
And being able to reach those people at the time that they're facing that decision, and first of all, creating awareness that there is an app out there that can help them make such a decision. And it's not that the app will make the decision, right? There are those that you can get. It's like, throwing a dice or coin and saying, okay,
magic 8 ball.
Yeah, that's not very useful. But it's an app that has been designed to help you discover and overcome some limiting assumptions. 5 steps, 5 limiting assumptions sequenced in that way. So it's really that the success is going to be dependent on whether you can reach that person that has that consequential problem for which the app is the solution.
And that's a mantra, I think, for any of us in business. Actually,
exactly.
You can substitute some of the words, but we are all here to solve the problems that matter. That otherwise we wouldn't have businesses, we wouldn't work for businesses because there would be no reason for being.
But it's easy to make mistakes, right? So one of the biggest mistakes I see that I've made, and I see many other entrepreneurs make, is you develop something. You try it out and it's not giving you the revenue or the income or impact that you want to make. So you then jump onto the next thing and the next thing, and all that you do is you're raising the potential that you have, but you almost never raise the actual result that you get. Versus going back and just picking that one thing that you do and asking yourself the question, how many people theoretically in the world could benefit from this thing? And it doesn't matter how micro niche you are, the number of people that will benefit will far, far exceed your capacity.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
So that's, to me, the essence of focus is going back to that. Rather than keep on adding more stuff that just increases that expectation gap, because every time you add another product or service, you increase the potential income and impact, but you don't increase your actual.
Yeah.
Because you have limited attention and budget, etc. So going back to that thing that got you in business in the first place, the thing that you're most passionate about, the thing that you really want to serve people, and then say, who are they? Who are these dream customers that would get enormous value from what I'm doing? And then how do I reach them? I'm launching a challenge. It's based on one of my own frustrations. Why the heck aren't people buying my amazing product or service? If you've ever been an entrepreneur, business owner, that's probably the number one frustration. I mean, it's frustrating not to be able to come up with a product or service that can solve a big problem. But imagine you have and nobody's buying it. So essentially, what we're going to be doing next week is we're putting people into the position of their dream customer and say, okay, let's go through the process. What is the problem this dream customer must experience, and how must it make them feel for your product or service to be the perfect solution? That's step number one. The step number two is, what's their conflict, to buy or not to buy? Clearly, there's a unique positive of buying your product, and there's a unique negative of not buying it, right? You have to make sure that they really get that. But there's also a unique positive of not buying and a unique negative of buying. What are those things? Try to put yourself in the mind of your dream customer and see if you can speculate what those are, because that will give you insight of how you have to change your offer.
Oh, fantastic.
So learning how to make decisions also can help us understand why other people are making bad decisions that negatively impact it.
Yeah, it's like not buying our product.
Exactly. or not listening to our incredible advice,
Exactly. Not listening to the
Yes.
lovely customers we want to serve because
You're
we
right.
want to serve them the dish they don't want.
We read
Yeah,
more books, we
yeah.
attend more masterminds, we keep on adding potential, but you don't add real results. Real
Yeah.
results come from focus, going back and
Yeah.
saying, who do I feel most passionate about? And there's a kind of an interesting analogy to that in terms of our personal lives. There's so many things that we can do, can't do. How do we decide? I had the incredible privilege of being on Necker Island with Richard Branson twice already in my life. And one evening we were sitting chatting, and I asked him, I said, there's been so much written about what you've said has made your life challenging when you were growing up, suffering from dyslexia, feeling that you were always stupid, that you didn't get it as quickly as anybody around you. What was that moment when you realized that this limitation can be overcome? He said to me, it was when he realized that he struggled reading. He struggled to remember stuff until he started reading something that he was really interested about. And suddenly the limitation was not that dominant anymore. He found it much easier to read. Right? And I think the same thing is when you find that one thing that you truly are interested and curious about, many of the obstacles that could be insurmountable obstacles suddenly just go away.
I found this. It took me a little while to find, what does that mean? Business coach, very broad, and even marketing coach, which is a lot of my background. But it was when I landed on the building brand new and what it meant in terms of getting to who people really were. All of a sudden, I could feel the passion come. And when things don't quite work, I go, okay, so that didn't quite work. Why didn't it work? Is there a tweak I make? But I don't go on to, building brand new doesn't work. What is it? Ask the audience, just get some other people to, get out of my head and go, okay, so I believe this is right. And it makes a difference. And it's what I'm meant to do. It is what I'm meant to do. And that belief, you're right, that belief makes the obstacles seem less, just seem like challenges or problems to solve rather than showstoppers.
Yeah. No, I mean, we all have real limitations, It's finding out what can I do where those limitations are not massively impactful.
Yeah.
And that's when you find what you're really passionate about, things just happen easier. It's like being in a right relationship, right? Suddenly it's just easier. Okay, that should be good feedback that I found the right person. That doesn't feel like effort.
Definitely. Someone said to me really early on when I'd left corporate life, and I was sort of driving myself to, this is such a sensible investment and I should do this and all that sort of thing. And someone very innocently said to me, asked me about my background. He said, I always wonder why people leave corporate life and then don't leverage what they know. And he sort of walked off and I went, But I look back on that, it was such an insightful thing to say, work with what you're great at and what you believe in and start with what you've got.
Yeah. And I think what you've got is what is that goal that you almost can't help yourself trying to achieve, right? And just using that as your anchor point is I think one of the most useful questions to ask yourself on an ongoing basis is what I'm doing now, are the people that I'm with now, both in my business and in my personal life, is it helping me make progress towards that goal, whatever that goal is?
Yeah.
And often the answer is no, it's not.
Yeah. And it's hard.
Okay, then stop it,
Yeah.
Yeah. My grandfather used to tell this joke. It's like the guy walks into the doctor's room and the doctor says, what's wrong? And he says, it really hurts when I do this, when I move my arm like this. And the doctor says, well, stop it.
That's brilliant. You're going to steal that one too. I might credit your grandfather with that.
What we do is we do these things, and when we ask ourselves, is this really helping us get anywhere? And if we are brutally honest, we'd say, no, it's not. It's like, okay, then stop it.
Yeah.
Stop doing this thing. Stop being with this person.
So why do we find it so hard to stop, to make that decision? Because that's a hard one, I think.
Yeah, it is because we've got, we all have a status quo bias, right? When we make decisions, it can be really overwhelming. So we need some kind of bias to decide, right? We have evolved into a species that has a bias that weighs what we have much greater than what we don't have. And for most people, that transforms into a status quo bias. The better the devil you know, right? It actually takes hard work to do the opposite. There's a small percentage of people that suffer from the opposite. They have an adventure bias. Right? They struggle to make commitments. They struggle to stay in a relationship, stay in a job, because they're constantly seeking the thrill of new things. So they have the opposite problem. They really have to work hard to convince themselves that actually it's better not to move, right? To stay where you are, because the upside of moving is very small and the downside could be really big. So that's the short answer is we have a status quo bias. If you think about why do we, struggle to quit a bad habit, smoking. So there again, it comes back to, is there some kind of disruptive question you could ask yourself? And this is one that we've built into our Harmony Decision Maker app, is that if you're trying to convince a friend of yours to stop smoking or using drugs or some other harmful thing, right? What we often do is we assume it's because they're stupid. So we ask them, don't you realize what the benefit will be if you stop, or the negative if you continue? As if they don't know. Of course they know,
Yeah.
They know the benefit of stopping smoking or using drugs or, drinking too much or whatever it is, right? What is in their subconscious that's holding them back is not the fact that they don't see the negative if they keep on doing it, or the positive if they stop. Is that in their mind, there's a negative of stopping and there's a positive of not stopping that they would have to give up. By asking them that directly, which is what we do on our app, we would say to you, Kym, what is the positive, the unique positive of smoking that you don't want to give up, right?
Yeah.
It's a hard question.
Yeah.
What we tell people is give yourself some credit. You wouldn't do it if there wasn't some major positive. Now, that positive is an assumption that might be a really bad assumption, but start with that. And what people would say is, well, it helps me cope with stress. And that's why they stuck, because in their mind, they say, I have a stressful life. I need a way of coping with stress. Here's a way that I found that helps me cope with stress. But what happens is, whether you write it in a workbook or you type it into the app, right? So what is the unique positive of smoking? And you say, it helps me cope with stress. What you've just done is you've transferred that assumption or belief from the subconscious to the conscious. Now it's staring back at you. And you can't help by starting to question it and going, is that really true?
Yeah.
And even if it is that the best way of coping with stress? Is there not another way, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we kind of do in our app, is we ask you that disruptive question, you answer it, and then the app just tells you, look at what you've written.
Yeah.
Is that really true? Could you be exaggerating that? Could there be another way of doing that? And the same with, so what's the negative if you just stopped cold turkey tomorrow, never smoked again, never drank? What would be the major negative, right? And you think about, what would you answer to that? Somebody might say, well, I'm scared that if I stop smoking, I will gain weight. Now, that was the assumption in their subconscious that was blocking. All that the app does is asks you the right question. You write your answer or type it in.
Yep.
But once it's there looking back at you, you can go, is that really true? Will I automatically gain weight if I stop smoking tomorrow? Will I be a miserable person? Won't I be fun to be around with? All of those things that's sitting in our subconscious can be exposed by just being asked the right question. And then when you answer it, not in your head, but when you actually write out the answer, type out the answer, it will then stare back at you. And then you are ready to challenge it. But you can't challenge an assumption or belief that's sitting in the subconscious mind. It doesn't treat it as an assumption, it treats it as fact. Because that's how we make decisions. We have these assumptions, and it's just if this, then that, if this, then that. We're in fully automatic mode most of the time when we're in decisions. So you actually need to slow down your thinking, get those questions to help you expose those assumptions, and then you're ready to check and challenge them.
Brilliant. What is it about investing in how we make decisions for people? There's lots of things they can invest in, lots of apps they can do. So why would people, it sort of leads on from what you said.
Sure.
Just is that really where the value of investing in, I guess, decision science from a big picture point of view for you, but in evaluating how we make decisions? Yeah.
Investing in your own ability to make better, faster decisions is a massively high leverage point, right? Because when you get it right, the consequences is always 10x, 100x, 200x, right? And that's been one of our frustrations is you find people that's been procrastinating on a decision, what to go and study, whether to get married, whether to have kids, whether to quit my job, whether to get out of a toxic relationship. They'll walk around with that thing as a dark cloud hanging over their head for weeks and months and sometimes years, but they won't sit down for an hour to just think through it. And that's kind of the campaign that I'm on, is to say, invest in your own ability to make quality decisions. And you'll walk away with a confident decision because you acknowledge that you've looked at this thing from all angles. You've explored all the viable options, and you came up with an option that has a much bigger upside than what you ever thought was possible, with a much lower downside than what you thought you'd have to ever live with.
Yeah.
And so that to me is why it's a good investment, right? Is that it has a big upside if it works and a small downside if it doesn't. Okay.
The other upside of it is, particularly with the app, the way you've been talking about that, is that what we're doing is building a better decision-making muscle. So it might,
absolutely,
like learning a language, like learning to play a musical instrument, like driving the car. The more we do it, the more it falls into our unconscious and becomes just part of the way your brain works.
Yeah. But it also helps us to understand, we use this technique at schools with kids that are being bullied. The thing that causes most of the suffering, interestingly enough, is not the physical abuse, because you recover from that. It's the mental suffering of not understanding why they're doing it to me.
Oh, wow. That's that.
So when you put themselves
unspecial and unsafe thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Into the shoes of the bully, you say, put yourselves in the shoe of the bully. Try to understand why they're doing it to you. What's the unique positive that they get from doing it? What's a unique negative that will happen to them if they stop? And by the way, if you're struggling to do that, have you ever bullied anybody yourself? Can I phone your little younger brother or sister? Then they all sort of break out into hysterical giggling. So it's not that difficult. You've done it before yourself, so it's not that difficult to imagine. All that we know is that people are good. Good people make bad decisions for good reasons. Yeah. It's our job to find out what that good reason is and see if we find a better reason.
So we've been, chatting for like 45 minutes, I think, already. Such amazing stuff. For our Building Brand New listeners, what would be something that you'd like to leave them with today?
One of the toughest groups to teach is young kids, right? Because they are brutally honest. If what you're saying is not interesting, they sleep or they play a game or something, right? So we've had to come up with really innovative ways to teach the core lessons. And I think one of the most important things, whether you're a kid or an adult, to remember is that life is kind of driven by a mathematical formula. And when we say that to kids, they obviously it's like curious, like, what is it? And then I write on the board, E plus R equal O. And I just let them leave it. And I let them speculate what it stands for. And then finally say, it's events plus response equal outcome. So it doesn't matter who you are. There's going to be positive and negative events that will happen to you. For most of it, you can't control these things. To some degree, you can influence them, but you can't control what happens to you in your life. Those are the events, they're random events. If you're lucky, you have more positive ones than negative ones. If you're unlucky, it's the opposite. You can't control that, but you can always control your response. And your response can make any event better or worse. If you have a negative event and you have a negative response, it's a double negative. But if you have a positive event and you have a positive response, it's a double positive. And those responses is our decisions. Something has happened. What am I going to do about it? So firstly is, what are my options? And to list those options down and to realize that some of those options that I have are not really options because they will make it worse. So isolate those ones that are positive responses. Right. And that is how you change your outcome. How people that grow up with the bad luck of having many, many negative events happen to them in their life still have a massively positive outcome because they had the courage to choose to make a positive response to whatever happens to them. And I think that to me is the essence of what drives me, and hopefully a lesson that everybody can take is to say you don't have much control over what happens to you, but you always have control over your response.
Oh, fantastic. It's just been so wonderful to have you on the show, Alan. I'm just buzzing. I've got so many notes and I've not asked like a quarter of them, but never mind. It is what it is. But you've been absolutely brilliant. Thank you for joining us. If people want to get in touch with you to find out more about the app or anything that you're doing, or if they want to follow the challenge or anything like that, how do they do that?
So I have a personal website, dralanbarnard.com. Our website for our app is called harmonyapps.com. I also have a YouTube channel, Dr. Alan Barnard. I have a podcast series called Impossible Unless. But I'll also share with you my direct messaging details on Instagram and Facebook, etc., so people can reach out directly if they have any burning questions or they think that there could be some value in collaborating.
Perfect. And listeners, we will put all of those details in the show notes, and we'll also, you made a reference to the Dr. Goldratt book as well. So what we'll do is, the goal. So we'll put a link to that. If listeners are interested in exploring that, they can go there.
Awesome.
So all that remains for me to do is to just say thank you. And I'm so glad we bumped into each other and had a little rant about apps.
Absolutely. And thank you for all the brilliant questions. You bring out the best when you ask the right questions.
Thanks for joining us for this fantastic episode. And I will speak to you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Building Brand You podcast. I'm Kym Hamer, and if you've enjoyed this episode, please leave me a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, and for all the latest news and tips, become a member of the brand new Building Brand You Facebook group. I help people to accelerate their success by unlocking their greatest asset. If you'd like to find out more, please book in for a free 20-minute coaching call at calendly.com/Kym Hamer/BBY chat. Accelerate your results by unlocking your greatest asset, you.